listening to Sopherstition with your hosts, Sophia T and Sophia R.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Sophia R.
And it's me, Sophia T.
And welcome to the second episode of Sopherstition. On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing the 2022 remake of the iconic horror franchise, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Let's dive right into it. Of course, spoiler alerts ahead.
This is the 9th film in the franchise, and it's a sequel to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre film from 1974.
The film centers around influencers looking to breathe new life into a Texas ghost town where they encounter Leatherface, the legendary killer, who wears a mask of human skin. After 50 years of hiding, Leatherface returns to terrorize your peaceful dreams. Let's jump into the review.
Now, for reference, I've seen half of the movies in this franchise: the 1974 original, the 2003 remake, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, and obviously this one. So I'll be looking at this through a lens that's moderately familiar with the franchise. So, seeing as this is your first foray into Texas Chainsaw, I'm very excited to hear what your first impressions of the film and series are.
Well, watching this through virgin eyes really captures only like a small percentage of the entire essence of this legendary franchise. Never having seen the 1974 classic, I was actually kind of scared that the movie wouldn't make sense to me, but in the end it all worked out. I can't believe I've been calling myself a horror connoisseur, but I've actually never seen the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Way to go, Sophia R. Call yourself a horror connoisseur. Anyway, moving on. From my virgin perspective, halfway across the movie, I gathered that a bunch of selfish, ignorant influencers caused the death of a sweet, misunderstood old lady who dedicated her life to giving a home to needy orphans. So after her unfortunate passing, her quote-unquote foster son is back in another murderous rampage. Even though I'm new to this franchise, I could sense how disappointed longtime fans of this franchise are, like Sophia T yourself.
To me, this movie feels like the stepchild of the Texas Chainsaw series. From afar, it seemingly fits in with the rest of its family, but when you get up close, you realize it doesn't entirely have the same genetic makeup. And what I mean by that is that it lacks the grit and feel of its predecessors. Instead, the usual grotesque, grody feels we get are replaced with something more polished and almost clean. Granted, we are revisiting Harlow in modern day, and it certainly is made to feel as though it took place recently. I would have preferred if they'd kept the grime of the series while bringing it into modern day.
Now, speaking of taking place more recently, I don't know, there's just something about modern day horror movies that really makes my skin crawl. Not in a horrifyingly good sense, but more of like a feeling of disgust. For some reason, if you bring modern day influences into a classic horror film, it feels as if you're throwing away years and years and years and years of passion that went into the franchise, not just passion, but hard work as well. I mean, the moment the characters whip out their iPhones, I'm out. I have nothing against social media influencers, but please just keep them out of horror movies. Just like what was that movie? Happy Death Day?
Oh, I didn't even bother seeing that one.
Yes, so you can already sense how bad it was without even having to see the movie.
It's such a corny title. I don't know. Maybe I should watch it. No?
If you have time to spare and you don't want to waste 2 hours of your life, but carry on.
Okay, well, while there's nothing inherently wrong with that, maybe part of the reason why we feel uncomfortable with the imagery of modern technology in horror is because so many of our favorite horror flicks are of an older era. So it's almost as though stepping out of that time period breaks the fourth wall when all you want to do is just be a spectator. Maybe someday a jump scare fan might look back fondly on the 2010s. Sticking with the theme of modernism, the racially diverse cast, iPhones, and colloquial use of the word lit aside.
They used lit in the movie? I didn't remember.
Yeah, I remember.
I didn't pay attention.
What's her face? Lila? When Lila was just standing there and she was like, lit.
Oh my god, no, I hate it even more now.
Anyway, this film also alluded to the present day with its urban-esque use of lighting, the frequent use of stark complementary colors and vibrant neon lights amid the darkness and heavy rain were actually very pleasing to the eyes.
Well, I'm gonna have to agree with you that the colors and the dark, moody ambience were actually very pleasing to the eyes. The vibrant colors actually added a sprinkle of a lighter mood towards the supremely dark atmosphere.
I can't help but feel that this film takes itself more seriously than it should, with the whole school shooting narrative where they try to hero Lila when she has to use a gun, or at the very end when Leatherface cuts off her sister's head and holds it for like 50,000 years for her to stare at while she's screaming and slowly being driven off on autopilot in a fancy car. It was there for shock value, but it just felt empty to me. Something about these scenes really lacked the punch that I think they could have pulled with more thought and care put into the execution.
Right. I'm guessing they just wanted her to at least have a turn at revenge, even if it's not directly towards a school shooter. Just like Luke from our last episode, how the deity chose him because he had the most pain.
There was a lot of mindless killing, wasn't there? It's almost like it's torture porn.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there was nothing sophisticated about this movie as much as it wanted to be. Even the skinning of the face, I felt was too sterile.
Oh, what is he, a doctor now?
No.
How did he go from being like a really grotesque serial killer to like a medical professional in the span of 50 years?
No, I mean sterile as in it was supposed to be shocking, but it just felt really empty. I don't know. I felt like it was a little bit lackluster. And it just felt like it was in there just for the sake of the lore. The film really didn't give Leatherface much depth at all. Even the bit where he puts on makeup on the mask, it felt really shoehorned in there. I'm talking about Sally Hardesty. So Sally Hardesty being a ranger with burning vengeance was extremely promising, especially when she seemed nuts to the two girls. I was so excited. I really like rogue badasses. But I got so frustrated with her when she wouldn't just shoot Leatherface point blank while he was vulnerable. All that prep for nothing.
I mean, I too feel pissed at the fact that Hardesty could have just ended Leatherface right there in his own room, but she chose not to because all she wanted was her own version of poetic justice. I don't know. Maybe this is why horror films get such a low rating. That could be the case. But in my opinion, the characters are just milking their own vengeance instead of getting right to the point.
You could do that in like a superhero movie, in any other kind of movie.
Yeah, that would make a lot more sense because you definitely want to amplify the main character, but the main character in horror movies the main characters are usually like the horror icons themselves. So
yes, and we're here to be disturbed. We want to be disturbed.
Why are you milking poetic justice when you could be milking the lore of the horror characters? So speaking of the lore of horror movie characters, let's talk a little bit about the backstory of Leatherface. My favorite part. I love history. Did you know that this horror icon was based on a true serial killer back in the 1950s? He was based off Ed Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul. He had lived in Plainfield, Wisconsin, and after the death of his controlling mother, whom he was extremely devoted to, his mental health deteriorated. Now, several residents of Plainfield actually went missing over the years, and Gein was actually found responsible for their deaths. He has also admitted to robbing graves, and an investigation of his home resulted in authorities finding organs stored in jars and masks made of human skin, which ignited the inspiration for the iconic leather mask, aka Leatherface. Now back to Leatherface, it is said that he was born a victim to a severe skin disease which caused his face to become disfigured. Because of his strange appearance, he was relentlessly bullied and mocked. I can relate.
Aww.
He wasn't very bright, but he was highly conscious of the fact that he was being treated so poorly. He was actually ashamed of the way he looked, so he began wearing a small leather mask to hide his face. Now, this habit eventually continued into adulthood, and eventually the mask practically became a part of him. Apparently, his mother had died giving birth to him, so he was transferred over to the orphanage in Harlow, Texas. Now, the caregiver of the orphanage, Ginny, became a motherly figure to Leatherface, which sparked his quote-unquote revenge murder rampage. So, it really makes you sympathize with Leatherface, to be honest. I mean, can you see how this relates back to Ed Gein about how...
mommy issues.
About mommy issues, exactly. About how troubled a child would be if he or she loses his mother at a really young age. Now, I don't know about you, but this is really giving me Jason Voorhees vibes over here. And I'm kind of wondering if Jason was inspired by Ed Gein too.
Well, Jason wasn't inspired by Ed Gein. He's got his own mommy issues. But they're both slashers and I can see similarities for sure.
Both slashers with mommy issues.
Yeah, hardcore.
Don't have mommy issues, guys.
Okay, now my favorite scene was the first kill. Breaking someone's wrist and then stabbing them to death with their own broken bone. Yes!
So brutal.
I've never seen that done before. Well, okay, aside from that, I feel like it didn't really bring anything new to the table. So that's a little bit of a bummer. But in second place, the reveal of Leatherface's mom in the fields, I thought that was kind of sweet and creepy, which is a good Tinder bio if you ask me.
Can we talk about how strong you have to be to break bones with just one quick swipe?
Yeah, that's pretty freaky.
Swipe like Tinder.
Yeah. Sweet but creepy.
Well, okay, my favorite scene would definitely have to be when Leatherface brings his murderous rampage on the bus. Now, there's a scene where all their bloody hands are pressed up against the window. It really reminds me of that cursed painting by Bill Stoneham titled The Hands Resist Him. You should go look up that painting and its backstory. It's actually really interesting. Apparently, I think that painting actually caused a few houses to burn down.
Oh god.
And, like, some people actually get nightmares after looking at that painting.
So maybe I won't look it up.
You're brave enough. Look it up. But for real, it really reminded me of that painting. And that was probably my favorite scene. Now, an honorable mention would actually be the irony of how Leatherface got stabbed by a chainsaw keychain.
I think he was a bit taken aback. Overall, I give this movie 5 out of 10 broken wrists.
I love the pun.
Well, okay. I doubt I would have passed this movie if it weren't for the lighting work and the 2 scenes I mentioned. And I would recommend Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. Ooh, that's a mouthful. For people who like gore.
And for those of you who actually haven't seen a single movie of this franchise, like me before this one, I highly recommend you start from the first one because that's where all the horror began. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise is definitely one to remember.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Sopherstition. If you're enjoying our podcast, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more horror content. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling us what horror movie you want us to review next. Until next time, stay spooky.